you doing right now, Megan? What are you doing right now?
Trying to prepare our homeschooling section for the children so that meanwhile we don't know what school they're going to. We haven't transitioned them into the schools here. We got to teach them at home. So because we have a variety from children from 12 to 1, they need different tools in order to learn. So we just trying to do what we can do. So these books here, they're definitely like in the US. If you have them, I have them at home, but I never thought to bring them. They get these exported, so they basically cost a little bit more here because we're getting it from here. But things like this is not cheaper here. If you have it at home, bring it from home because it'd be a lot more work. Now the only thing is it could be a little bit heavy, so just be strategic when you're bringing your books. But this is definitely more expensive here than it is in the US. I got these cheaper at Walmart.
So, question. So, one of my questions to you is, how difficult is it to actually homeschool? Seeing that we did homeschool in the States, and now that we're here, how is it to homeschool?
I mean, honestly, homeschool is based out of the home. So anywhere you do homeschool is going to be a challenge, or it's going to be the same things you run into, whether you're in America, whether you're in Africa. Now, I will say with Swahili being a language that we're not familiar with, the learning of Swahili is something that we're going to implement so that we can transition the children into a cultural school versus an international school much easier. So that is the on top of them learning other languages now, because we live here and because this is the language of the locals, we have to learn that as well. So that I would say homeschool is what you make it. But
what's the benefit of it?
The benefit is that you can, you don't have to teach them fluff that has nothing to do with anything, not to mention there's a lot of things in the school systems in America that are based off of the system that they want you to learn. So we don't teach our children a system of how to work for other people or how to, to end up in prisons or anything like that, because to some degree, public schools in America just teach you how to be an employee, or it molds you to be in the system of some sort, whatever system that is. So we get to have complete control on what they're learning. We get to add to what they're learning. We get to implement things that we think is important, and they also get the curriculum that they're supposed to have. So our goal is to not just have our children at the level that they're at, but to actually to exceed that level, so that they are not just where they're supposed to be, but they're at a whole nother level. Our children are working on 4 languages. Typically, I mean, me growing up, I never was learning 4 languages. By the time I got to high school, they introduced Spanish and French, but we're able to implement different languages. We're able to implement agriculture, and we just give our children as much as we can when it comes to homeschool, because we're in complete control of that. So
now speak on the transition of going to a private local school, seeing that we are homeschooling versus going to an international school where that education is kind of similar to the American standard education, where they still teaching about Disneyland or the economics of America. Well, as you were speaking on, we teach kind of contrary to the construct or system that they teach on. So talk about that, like transitioning from homeschooling, the process of transitioning to a local private school.
Right. So from our research, we've seen that homeschool is actually a better transition into a cultural school versus putting them directly into international school and then possibly getting them into cultural school, because international is very similar to America, and depending on what your goals are and depending on what the outcome you want of your children, international school may not be the actual goal of what you're trying to do. I know some people do it because they want to be as similar to America as they can, so that the transition is not absolutely out of control for the children. But it also, they have different local schools out here as well. So it depends on which local school you actually put your children in, because I mean, just like anywhere you go, there's going to be different curriculums with different schools. So really you have to do your own due diligence to find out, okay, if I want to put them in a culture school, this is what I'm looking to get out of that school. How do they operate? What's their curriculum? What's their stats? And we just found that homeschooling is a great transition into the school that we want our children in. But international school is not necessarily what we're looking for, just like we weren't looking for public school system curriculum when we were in America. So homeschool right now for us is more comfortable for us, especially with having six children from ages 1 to 12. We get to be very creative, and we get to have more control on how they transition versus just throwing them into the same situation in our eyes, from our perspective. So.
All right, now last question, because I know this is usually the big question, especially for sisters and mothers. Seeing that you do a lot for the house, as far as, you know, cooking, pretty much managing the cleaning and the education for the children. As a mother, as a sister, as a wife, how is that process? Like, how is it? What's your thoughts, or what's your feelings, or, you know, how do you bring balance into that life?
Well,
with homeschooling.
With homeschooling, I mean, honestly, here it seems to be that there's a little bit more help when it comes to that. There's dadas that are available, which are helpers in the house. So even now, with us staying where we are, I don't have to necessarily be cleaning all day, every day. We do have to do that. We do have to tidy up. We do have to maintain. But we have somebody that comes in either every day or every other day. So things that I would normally have to spend 2-3 hours doing myself, I can put towards someone else. And in the transition of us really, getting comfortable and getting settled in our own home, I know that that's going to be a huge help, because even 2 or 3 hours, any mama knows, any wife knows, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours is huge in a day. And the way that we operate our homeschool, we don't homeschool all day. We don't do 8 hours of just of school anyway. So if we can put 3 hours or 4 hours back into the children or back into teaching versus me cleaning the kitchen all day or making beds and do all that stuff, and we have somebody to help, it's a big help. And you don't necessarily even have to have a helper. It just comes down to the management of your organization of time. And that was the biggest transition that I had in the beginning, and still struggle with now. But you just learn as you go, so that, you know, the kids are different age. Okay, I have the older kids, sometimes work with the younger kids while I'm working with another child. Or, you know, during that time, you just have to organize your time so that you make it work best for your family. The bonus of homeschool is because it could be custom to what you need and what your children need and what your husband needs and what your household needs and what that looks like. That's the benefit of homeschooling. Until we feel comfortable putting him into another school where you're like, you know what, we align with the curriculum, we align with what you're teaching, and we don't have a problem with that. That's the best way to do it, is just really managing your time and executing that and sticking to that, because if you don't, everything falls apart, you become behind, your children become behind, you get overwhelmed, it's just a vicious cycle. So really time management is the word of the day.
Yeah, so it just sparked actually another question. It'd be laughing. So, because you said something very powerful, and it just, you know, I got my biblical mind going. So, seeing that, you know, predominantly when we were home, it was just typically me and you, and trying to manage that. And, you know, in America, it is actually very, very difficult to truly apply the principles like in fullness of as the scriptures speak.
Right.
So with you being here and you brought up a dada, which is a servant or a handmaid, does the scripture start to pop off the page for you now that you see the difference between having a handmaid or servant at your will versus, you know, man and woman having to kind of work in that concept, seeing that a man has a certain duty, and even a woman has a wife has a certain duty, and if we don't have that fullness of structure due to whatever the case is, how can actually cripple a household? So do you see a difference in that?
I absolutely see the benefit on how things are done here. Because it loosens you up, even for the man. I mean, they have people who manage the garden or help with things around the house when it comes to outside duties, even for the men. But a woman being in there and helping and doing those things so that I can concentrate on teaching my children, or because I mean they really are literally a helping hand, and that's why in the scriptures they had many handmaids, and that's why I think that we struggle this day and age because we're so used to doing everything ourselves. Like me and my husband work from home, but if I'm working, who's managing the children? The children are trying to manage the children, and it's crazy. My husband is working, we're working at the same time. It is very difficult, and something has to give. And if you're depending on working in order to bring in money, in order to provide and survive, when is there time to actually put towards children? When is there time to put towards just anything outside of being in the rat race? Mm-hmm. So absolutely the scriptures jump off. Helpers are so important, and even though we are going to be looking and transitioning into someone that we feel is fit for our family, I can see the potential. I mean, that was mostly what I was excited about even before I got here, knowing that, okay, somebody's going to be able to help me while I'm trying to help my children, because then you can focus in on that. When you have so much to do and your mind is overwhelmed, you can't do your job. You're just a jack of all trades. Instead of being a master of one thing, or even coming close to it, you're trying to take on 10 hats, and it just kind of cuts down on the hats and then assists you on what to do. Doesn't mean that you neglect all your responsibilities. It just means that there's actual help, and there's a reason why they had help like this back in the day. So I could really appreciate that aspect that they I can appreciate it, and I'm gonna be using it. Okay.
Yeah, so that being said, family, we appreciate y'all tuning in on the video. Make sure you all click subscribe, like, comment, and share. And you heard it here first, how it is to homeschool in Africa. So make sure y'all continue to follow the journey of keeping up with the K's, or Africades, excuse me. And let's continue to grow and see what Mama Africa has to offer. So with that, we say shalom, shalom.
Shalom.